And you've never, I guess in romance you call it the 7-year itch, but when it comes to politics, the itch comes a year earlier. Historian Doris Kearns-Goodwin is in Boston. NBC's Tim Russert and Tom Brokaw are here with me once again in the studio. Good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
Hello.
Let's talk about expectations versus reality. Tom and Tim, I'll start with you. Ken Melman said to me a second ago, we expected a bad night. You know, we got a war going on that's not popular. We got a second-term president, midterm elections. So what did they expect versus what did they get, Tim?
Well, I know that the president's a cheerleader, but he ran around the country and said, we're going to keep both houses. Karl Rove, his chief political operative, said, we'll lose 8 to 10 House seats. And Matt, this morning they're saying, well, this is what happens in the second term mid-year elections. Well, the fact is Bill Clinton gained seats in his second term midterm election. Ronald Reagan had a loss of 5 seats in the House and 8 in the Senate. It's nothing like the shellacking that the president got last night.
So the Republicans are reeling this morning, in your opinion?
Oh, there's no question about that. This is these elections are about sending a message, and this message is loud and clear on a couple of big issues. I think specifically on Iraq, we want more credibility and accountability. We want to see a strategy that we think will protect the interests of this country. And I think that this election, as much as anything, Matt, was about tone. We want a changed attitude in Washington. As you go across the country, people are saying the arrogance of everyone in Washington, Democrat and Republican alike, by the way. They're fighting with each other over theology, not about governing in the best interest of this country.
Let's talk about some exploring of some of those other topics you talked about. On the subject of who would handle terrorism better, this has always been Republican territory, usually about a 20-point margin between the Republicans and the Democrats here. Last night, it broke down fairly evenly. Why? Is that Iraq?
Absolutely. People no longer believe that Iraq is helping the war on terror. They made that very, very clear. And that's why the president has lost points on that.
Well, also, there's the objective reality of things are not going well in Afghanistan now. I mean, NATO is in there in a much larger force than we are. I've been there several times, and the Taliban are pouring in to Afghanistan, and people are aware of that. And across the country, you've got reservists and National Guardsmen and people who have come back, and they've got their own stories to tell, and they expect to have to go back again.
And Doris, let me bring you in right now. Let's put this into perspective, historical perspective, if you will, and we talk about the war party. And I'm not labeling Republicans as in hawks and doves. I'm talking about the party in control while a war is being fought. What's the statistic? What does it show us historically? What happens to that party?
Well, it's interesting. In 1942, when the Republican Party was out of power and the Democrats were in power with World War II, the Democrats lost huge in the midterm elections in 42. Interestingly, in part because 3 days before the election, some dumb bureaucrat in the Roosevelt administration announced that coffee would be rationed to 1 cup per day. Outcry. And the Republicans had a huge victory because they were irritated about the country was about the shortages and the lack of progress in the war. Interestingly, a few months later, when the rubber shortage brought an end to rubber toys and rubber raincoats, this time Roosevelt intervened when rubber girdles were about to be unmanufactured. Women's outcry was so great, they said men's morale will go down, stomachs will be out. He made an exception and allowed girdles to be manufactured. And of course, by 44, when the war turned around, he won. In 46, there was a sense after Roosevelt had died and Truman had taken over, the Republicans won big in that midterm election. People were irritated by shortages. They didn't feel that Truman had sort of taken hold of the presidency.
Right.
In a certain way, it freed him to become his own man. He started speaking much more straightly. I am Harry Truman, give him hell, Harry. And he wins a stunning election in 48, in part because the Republican Congress didn't deliver at that time. He
Right.
called it a do-nothing Congress. Similarly, when Gingrich's Congress didn't deliver in 1994, after that great blowout against the Democrats, then they turned around and re-elected Clinton in 96, and they won back seats in 98.
And that's actually a good question for you guys right here. So what's the lesson for the Democrats here? Okay, you got control of Congress. What do you do with it?
Well, I think that we're already beginning to hear. They're saying, you know, we're not going to, we've got a big domestic agenda. They're talking already about stem cell research. They're talking about minimum wage, prescription drug reform, that kind of thing. It is not crash and burn. Let's go through Washington and say vengeance will be ours.
Well, because you have to also remember, Nancy Pelosi, as the leader of the the Speaker of the House of Representatives, she is the worst nightmare of the Republicans. She is a lightning rod. And so is she going to be someone who can broker some sort of bipartisan action in the House?
It's unclear. And it's unclear how much control she can keep over her new party chairman. These are strong-willed men. Charlie Rangel, Ways and Means, John Conyers, Judiciary, John Dingell, Energy. These men have been waiting to get that gavel in their hands. But, Matt, I think based on the comments I heard last night, the Democrats get it, and I think the Republicans get it. It is time to try to get something done, and we will find out if they can do it. They don't have much time.
10 seconds left. Joe Lieberman looked pretty smart last night, didn't he? In terms of, the guy gets taken
He did,
running as a Democrat and comes back.
There are anomalies in every election. Here's Joe Lieberman, who ran as an independent and as someone who's been very supportive for a Democrat of the war in a liberal state. He goes back to Washington. Republicans are trying to hang on to that twig at this point, saying, well, it wasn't just all about Iraq, but it was about Iraq, and it was about Iraq across a broad spectrum of issues.
And he goes back as chairman of the Homeland Security Committee.
Or any committee he wants.
Yeah, exactly. Tim and Tom, good night last night, and thanks for stretching your hours to the morning.